Last year we celebrated 100 years of voting rights for women. But what about celebrating 100 years of voting rights for men? Men also got... No, I'm sorry, but I cannot keep repeating everything that you already know. I would be wasting your time. I'll rather tell you what I've learned this year, what I've learned by listening to the female whistleblowers from the documentary I'm making, and how their stories taught me something which goes way beyond feminism. It is not a pretty picture, and for those who aren't in the mood, I please urge you to stop watching this video. It's a grim future which lies ahead of us. I was no men's rights advocate. All I did was record a video venting my frustrations over the insanity of too many women, clearly protected and supported by too many laws, tailored by too many insane people, as if the women and the system suffer from a global personality disorder. So I addressed this cold, obsessive, violent, idiotic and demonizing pandemic in 2019. In a video on YouTube, which got shadow banned before it went viral thanks to a Voice for Men, who shared this video on their Facebook page just before they themselves were taken down. I didn't know what a shadow ban was, nor why social media took down a Voice for Men. Then, little by little, I learned the insanity I'd addressed in my video traveled further than you and I ever deemed possible. When I first spoke at Messages for Men in London, I remember I started my talk by saying how surprised I was that the location of the event had to be kept secret, like I was attending some illegal underground gathering, a forbidden underground resistance, like it was war. 1 year later, I'm speaking from my basement in a new world with a second lockdown looming because of this mysterious virus, the new terrorist and public enemy number one. I remember 9/11. In retrospect, I see how they toyed with our human rights. After the fascists and the communists, we got a new adversary, which was the terrorists. Aaron Russo said the advantage of a new enemy would be an abstract enemy. And with this enemy, he said, people would want the state to take their liberties away, to protect them from the enemy. But the enemy wasn't perfect, so they changed the enemy with several new ones. The narrative is still intact. It is all to keep taking liberties away, in a way people will tolerate it and even demand it. I don't have to name the enemies. You know who they are. I will focus on one in particular, which is the man's adversary, which is the feminist narrative. However, there are more. So here we are, wearing the mask. I wear the mask at stores to avoid being reported. And it's not the men who are so report happy. No, that would be the women. And this is what women love to do above all. It turns out George Orwell was only wrong about two things. 1984 was 2020 and Big Brother is Big Sister. I would like to tell you a true story about this. A man and a woman got pregnant. I don't need to tell you that most of the gestation occurs in the body of the female. The woman wanted the baby, but she also did not want a baby. This tends to happen with BPD women. And I would suggest half of women in our society have BPD. And I'm being terribly optimistic by saying half. The woman gestates for 3 months and all of a sudden, in one of her terrible mood swings, she decides she does not want the baby anymore. The man's joy is now gone. So the man says, please don't kill our child. Let me have her then. I can raise her. They know it will be a girl. They have done 2 ultrasounds. And he is already overwhelmed by his love for his child, even though it's invisible by a thin layer of flesh and skin from the mother's belly. Please, he begs her, don't kill her. There's no reason. 2 weeks later, his child was ripped to pieces. The child, you see, is the mother's possession. She can do whatever she wants with it. The man knows the exact time of the execution of his unborn daughter, 10 a.m. He lies in bed, crying, feeling powerless and guilty towards his daughter. In his mind, he sees a 21-year-old version of her, and she is looking at him as he is shouting, screaming, and crying, repeating that he is so sorry. But this was 2008. And this happened in 2020. The man would have been in grave danger for committing a huge crime. He asked the female to give birth. In the eyes of the new generation of feminists, this man is a psychopath. How could he be so narcissistic to put his partner in the dangers of pregnancy? To have her go through all the discomfort and pain of giving birth, and even risking death. Other Facebook groups were notified, from the Witches' Coven to other man-hating groups, because the man had posted his story. Please don't kill our child. Young women said to the man, and I quote, I hope you will never ever impregnate a woman again, and if you do, I hope she will abort your child again, because clearly you are a narcissistic psychopath. Feminist doctrine is collective borderline personality disorder. Obviously, the narcissist psychopaths are the women themselves. Only young, dumb women are susceptible to the amazing technique of projecting their own criminal behavior onto their spouses and get away with it. The woman killed her child, no question about it. The man is the narcissistic psychopath because he asked her to not kill the child. The conviction and hatred of these young women is as troubling as the burning cities we see, or the cause of the lockdowns from which we are watching the Western world burn. What can we do when an entire generation has been taught to hate, loathe and despise men, or their country, or their identity, their color or creed? We may wonder who is doing this to us and for what purpose. We must always bear in mind what is the nature of the whole. Feminism is a part of an entire spectrum. They got most of our men as well as they are working on our children, and they got our unborn children as well. If there's a threat to their agenda, like a threat to overturn Roe versus Wade, even if in reality this won't be overturned, they will try to stop a woman like Amy Coney Barrett. I recently read that many young women consider it to be a crime against the environment to put a child in this world. If you hear the powers that be about the overpopulation problem, this is a way to control it. There's silence on the mainstream media when it comes to men's rights. You have been silenced because your voice opposes their narrative. This is why feminism is so heavily endorsed on mainstream media. What about your truth, your suffering, and all the injustices you've lived through? They do not serve a purpose. It is the women they're after. It is the naive and susceptible they want. Look at the presidential elections, how easy they make it for Biden. That's the feminist side, with feminist Harris. How difficult they make it for Trump. He is getting the alienated father treatment. If you hate this man, their propaganda was as effective as it was for you. You as a man were falsely accused or portrayed as this toxic, narcissistic psychopath. You might be surprised to know the people who destroyed you are exactly the same people who push for Biden and Harris. If you voted for Biden, you voted for the feminist agenda, which will come down to hunt us, as they hunted you down and destroyed your family and everything you loved and owned. You build up your life, you lose it and you have it build up again. You have to work for 2 lifetimes. That's providing tax for 2 lives plus your partner. Traditionally, the state could only tax 1, which was the man, and now they can tax 3 lives. The woman and you twice when you lose everything and rebuild it all. While they force your children out of your homes as soon as possible to be indoctrinated with their propaganda, it is also smartly laid out. As a matter of fact, it is so smart that they might even make you vote for your own enemy. In case you're interested, I can tell you what purpose served feminism. It looks like it's giving the power to women. However, that's just secondary. We are witnessing an immense military operation without the planes and bombs. There is a silent war on Western civilization using military strategies. Feminism is a part of various segments, and you see it being played out right in front of your eyes. And they do it this way because nobody would ever allow their families to be destroyed, their children being indoctrinated if it was Hitler Germany, or your rights being stripped one by one. If you want to have a crippled and defenseless society, this is how you create one. I would like to think it's the natural course of modern civilization, that empowerment of women is a part of civilization's evolution. And this might be very well the case. Perhaps this is how civilizations like ancient Egypt or Rome came to an end. I do not know. A matriarchy probably will not last long with these kinds of women. It would collapse. And once plunging back into the Dark Ages, we know who will rule. Of course it will be the men. What I am worried about is a matriarchy in disguise. A communist form of a women's republic governed by the wealthiest, which are a little group of people, men and women controlling society for years to come. But applying Occam's razor, I think what we are seeing here is just a scheme to cripple the economies so powerful countries can take over. That's probably all there is to it. A war can also be fought using idealism of beautiful, social and awfully nice things to fight for. And to talk people into the idea a certain group of the population is evil and toxic. To execute this plan, you target the most susceptible and weak, of course, which are the women and the very young, undeveloped people. They needed to cripple your family first, and that's why we're all here. You were the first victims. It's a sour kind of consolation for man. Here we are as a collective, remembering the days when we could walk out in the sun, enjoy concerts, go to parks, pubs or meetings, without either COVID eyes or feminist eyes, BLM socialists, women's eyes watching you, waiting for any excuse to destroy you, your family and your children, while waiting for a vaccine, now having to worry about what they put in it. Now the world knows about losing faith and trust in the system. Voices who dare to address these issues have been silenced and banned. And the worst thing is that we will all just have to let it happen. Men's rights activists can't protest just like COVID protesters. Feminists can't protest just like BLM protesters. And we know this. That's why we only see a handful of men's rights activists against a sea of feminist protesters. That's why we only see a handful of COVID protesters against a sea of BLM protesters. That's why we are broadcasting our shadow banned videos from our basement instead of on stage with a large audience. This is how men must have felt when the system took them by surprise. Men quickly learned there was no way to oppose, and now many of us know how that feels. Except of course for the ones who have joined the system and are reporting us, spying on us and ratting on us. Before COVID, I had this wish for men to stand up against the system which is crushing them. It's exactly the same system which is now crushing us all. On International Women's Day, March 2020, 1.5 million women were allowed to protest for equality, while the men couldn't in COVID times. Protesting the entire country into lockdown, and if this was all a plan, it could not have been executed better. When I spoke to one of the first whistleblowers of my documentary, she compared the feminist narrative to NATO strategic warfare. The whistleblowers, one by one, were confirming that feminist narrative is a strategic kind of warfare. Men were right. They were in the middle of an invisible war. But the birds were whistling and the sun was shining. Men were laughed at, ridiculed by the people who ought to support them. But how could these people know this indeed was a war? And it is such a dirty war, even the people, without knowing it, were destroying these men with their ignorance, not knowing, thus denying there is a war. The whistleblowers confirmed this war is real. It is devastating, and again it is the men. It was in the courts' benches instead of the trenches of the killing fields. And now they got the women too. If the election goes the way they want it, they will have everything. It's a war which never could have happened without grooming the gender which is most susceptible to this kind of strategic warfare. The enemy is the man. The enemy is mankind destroying the planet. The enemy is overpopulation. The enemy is a deadly mysterious virus. The savior is a vaccine. The true enemy is conditioning of apathy and detachment, the de-emotionalization of we the people. We now live in a world where men avoid women, people avoid people, where we wear the mask and we don't hug, kiss, shake hands or gather, in which we are locked down, where there are curfews. I'm being in one as I speak, and it started when the last survivor of the Second World War were gone. Survivors would have recognized a pattern here and might have warned us. There's a lot of insight on how the Jews in Nazi Germany were methodically stripped from their rights, forced into ghettos and subsequently exterminated. How could they have let it go that far? Wir haben es nicht gewusst is a known German phrase. We just weren't aware. There's a clear parallel today, and now we understand. Because where is this all leading up to? Do we think there will be a vaccine and we'll all be free again? Do we think racism will be eradicated because of BLM? Are we waiting for feminism to say, okay, hold it. It is 12 p.m. today. We just achieved equality. That was it, folks. Thanks for your cooperation. And all will be back to normal? Or are we witnessing a war unfolding here? If I would give you my personal opinion, I would be silenced. And there you have the answer. Silencing of men's issues. Silencing of all narrative opposing this warfare agenda. I think we can conclude what needs to be concluded. It is not feminism which did me in. I was ready and still am to fight. But if they ban you, censor you and silence you, and now you cannot protest, debate, unite or talk, if they force you into the black hole and you disappear into oblivion, I wish we could stand up. I had good hopes we could. But they got us. No protests, no opposing, no nothing. Let's wait and see what the near future holds for us. In the meanwhile, I'm still working on the documentary and hopefully this will open people's eyes. I want to congratulate men and send them all my love. You did well. You're still standing. Most of you went through hell, and I think I dare to state this. I never compared anything with the Second World War. There must have been worst of times, I always said. Think of your grandfathers barely surviving the camps in Japan, in Germany, in Poland. Many did not survive. But you men, you alienated fathers and falsely accused men, you went through a hell, which in many cases lasted up to 18 years or 21 years. The missing of your children, to see them grow up, or to see them hate you because the mother made them hate you, to see the system working against you, to lose everything you owned, losing your family and friends. 20 years of war. 20 years of a silent war which was even denied. I have heard your stories and all I can say, for what it is worth, you are the strong man. You have done so well, and I thank you for being able to forgive during the unforgivable hour. To risk all you have left, to fight in court, and lose it with that final verdict, and build it all up from scratch, while never breathing one word too much about your loss. And to quote Rudyard Kipling, what I hope to teach my children one day, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you, except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, And which is more, you'll be a man, my son. On behalf of so many women around the world, thank you for being that man.